Hi guys, it's Mrs. Bracy with your video on the vertex form of a quadratic. I am on page 43 in your packet. You can see there's a little bit of a question at the top that we're actually going to skip for now. We're going to start where it says vertex form of a quadratic. Again, this is page 43. And so what you need to understand today is the difference between standard form and vertex form, what vertex form tells us about a parabola, and how we can convert between the two forms. So if I have standard form, I can go to vertex form and vice versa. So standard form, if you remember, is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Remember, that can also be equal to 0 depending on the situation. And vertex form is in two spots for you here. We're going to see it here underneath vertex form and down here. And so vertex form is a times the quantity x minus h squared plus k. And so when it's in this form, this gives us the vertex. H comma k is going to be the vertex. You can see that here. Okay, a is the number in front, just like it is for standard form. It's called the leading coefficient. Okay, but in this form, let me scooch this up a little bit. In this form, h is the x-coordinate of the vertex, and k is the y-coordinate of the vertex. So previously we were looking for the vertex on our calculator. If we're in this form, we can figure out the vertex without looking at the calculator. One thing I want you to notice right here is that we do have a minus sign in front of the h in our parentheses. So what that means, because h is positive here, what that means is that this sign is going to be the opposite of the x-coordinate of the vertex. So if there's a minus sign there, the x-coordinate will be positive. If there's a plus sign there, then the x-coordinate will be negative. So that's the only thing you have to remember, is that this coordinate is going to change. Whereas this is plus k, so whatever this says it will be. If this says minus k, then this would be negative. Okay, so we'll look at some examples of that in just a second. But this is your vertex form. This is definitely something you're going to need to know how to use, something that you're probably going to want to memorize. Okay, so let's look at page 44. And at the top of page 44 are some examples. So I want to start by writing vertex form again at the top here. So y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Okay, so remember, the vertex is at h comma k. So we're going to look at this first example. It's right in this form for us. So 2 is our a value. A is equal to 2. Okay, and then it says x minus h, and this says x minus 4. So h is 4. Again, if it says minus 4, this is going to be positive. And then k is equal to, since it says plus 3, k is equal to positive 3. So the vertex of this parabola is at 4, 3. And it also asks us about the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line down the center of the parabola, and its formula is always x equals, its equation is always x equals, and then you just use the x-coordinate of the vertex. So that equation would be at x equals 4. So if I graphed this parabola, the vertex would be at 4, 3, so I'd be over 4, up 3. Since a is positive, this would be like a smiley face, okay, so it would go in this direction. This is just a sketch, of course. And then the axis of symmetry would be the vertical line through the parabola, and so you can see that the x-coordinate of the vertex would be where this would hit the x-axis, so that's why it's x equals 4. Okay, let's look at another example. So for the second one, the a value in front of the parentheses that you can't see is equal to 1. Now look in the parentheses, x plus 3 means that the h is negative 3. Again, we change the sign. And then plus 3 means that k is equal to positive 3. So we change this sign and we keep this one. Okay, so the vertex is going to be at what? You think you can figure it out? This is going to be negative 3, 3. Okay, and so then the axis of symmetry is going to be, again, at x equals, and then you just tell me the x-coordinate of the vertex, so negative 3. So these are always going to be the same value. Okay, so why don't you give number 3 a try, and I'm going to have a question pop up on the screen and have you answer what you think the vertex is for this question. Okay, so just so you can check yourself here, a is equal to -4, h is equal to -6 because we changed the sign, and in this case, k is equal to -1 because we keep the sign. So the vertex is at -6, -1. So hopefully you got that. And the axis of symmetry here is at x equals -6. Okay, so that's how the vertex form works. Now, what we also have to be able to do is to convert forms, okay? So we're going to come down here. We're going to take a look at an example where we're converting from standard form to vertex form. Okay, and we're going to do that by using that complete the square method that we learned a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to do this example with you, and then we're going to kind of write the steps as to what to do while we're going, okay? So the first thing I want you to do is to make it easier for yourself. We'll write this over here. Set the equation equal to 0. So you're really going to take out the y, okay? It'll be a little bit easier if you don't have the y. So I'm going to take my quadratic and set it equal to 0. Okay, now the next few steps are going to seem very familiar because you're going to follow the process for complete the square, just like you did, as I said a couple weeks ago when we were using this process to solve. So we're going to add 4 to both sides and put that little blank in there. So x squared plus 2x and then the blank equals 0 plus 4 is 4 and then the blank. Now do you remember how to complete the square? You take this number here and divide it by 2, right? 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then you take that number and square it, and 1 squared is 1. So we add 1 to both sides. Okay, that's the process called complete the square. Now we factor this. We find two numbers that add to 2 and multiply to 1. And it's 1 and 1. So you can write that, if you need this little step in between, you can write that like this. But hopefully you know by now that that really means x plus 1 squared. And that's equal to 4 plus 1, which is 5. Okay? Now you're going to complete the square, but you are going to not, oops, I forgot the do. Do not take the square root on both sides because that completes the solving for x, and we're not trying to do that. We're trying to put this equation into this form. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stop at that point and we're going to move the constant back over. So the constant here is 5, and I'm going to move that back over here. Now to move it, I'm going to have to subtract it. So the x plus 1 squared is going to stay. The minus 5 drops down, and now this is equal to 5 minus 5 is 0. Now that's a good thing. I started by getting it equal to 0. I want to get it back where it's equal to 0. And now all I have to do is change the 0 back to a y. Okay, so we're going to put y equals back in and take out the equals 0. And so this is going to be y equals x plus 1 squared minus 5. And now we have put this into that form. So what we did was we started by taking out the y and replacing it with 0. When we get back to 0, we need to take out the 0 and replace it with y to finish up. So what would be the vertex of this parabola? Well, right here we have plus 1, so it's -1. Right here we have minus 5, so it's -5. So there is your vertex of that parabola. One nice thing about this process is that it's a way to find the vertex without needing a calculator. Although there is another way to do that as well that we will talk about. Okay, so there's your process, and we are going to fill this process into a flashcard. So if you want to grab a flashcard, I know you might need to pause the video, get yourself set up here, grab a flashcard. This is number 29, and it's vertex form of a quadratic. And we are still in unit 7. This is a very long unit, but we're getting there. We're almost done. Okay, so vertex form goes like this: y equals a, parentheses, x minus h, parentheses with the squared outside, plus K. All right, so A is your leading coefficient. Do you remember the importance of the leading coefficient? The most important thing about the leading coefficient is that it tells us which way the parabola opens, right? So if it's a positive A, it opens up, and if it's a negative A, it opens down. So that's really the importance of that leading coefficient. Okay, and then we have H comma K standing for our, let's say equals, standing for our vertex. All right. Okay, so here's some examples of things that relate to this. Okay, so we've got, let's give you y equals 4 times x minus 1 squared plus 3. Okay, so remember what these things are. This is your leading coefficient. Okay, so we can say down here that a is equal to 4, which tells us that the parabola will open up. And then we have these two numbers, which will give us the vertex, right? So I'll do that in pink. H will equal 1, because we change this sign here, and K will equal 3, because we keep the sign there. So 1 comma 3 is the vertex. Okay, and so that also tells us that the axis of symmetry is at x equals 1. Okay, so there's an example using the form itself. Now let's do an example where we have to convert it. So I have a little bit more room on this side. We're going to put y equals x squared plus 4x minus 3 in vertex form. Okay, so we'll write down the steps while we do this. Step 1 is to set it equal to 0. So x squared plus 4x minus 3 equals 0. Step 2 is complete the square. And remember, we're not going to do the square root part. We'll write that down in a second. So when we complete the square, we're going to add 3 to both sides. So we have x squared plus 4x blank equals 0 plus 3 is 3, and a blank, because if we add something to one side, we have to add it to the other. Okay, so we're going to do 4 here. So off to the side, I got to squeeze it in. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. All right, so then we take this and we convert it to a binomial squared. Okay, and remember this number right here, when you do 4 divided by 2, that number is what's going to go in here. So this is going to be x plus 2, because what adds to 4 and multiplies to 4? 2 and 2. So it's x plus 2 squared equals 3 plus 4 is 7. And then remember, do not take the square root. Okay, we're going to stop at that point, and we're going to be able to convert this now. So step 3 is move constant over. Okay, so since we have 7 here, we're going to subtract 7 on both sides. We're going to keep the binomial squared and just put the minus 7 after it. 7 minus 7 is 0. And then finally, we're going to put y equals back in, and that goes in the front. So we're going to put y equals in front, drop this down, and since we put y equals in front, we get rid of the equals 0. And so really quickly, what vertex would you give that here? What would you say the vertex is here? So I'm going to have a question pop up and see what you think. What is the vertex here? And hopefully you got -2, -7 for the vertex. Okay, so that's vertex form. And don't forget you have a quiz next class, so make sure you study for that, and then we'll work more with vertex form after the quiz. See you soon.